Hi, everyone that's logged on thus far. Thank you for joining us. We are going to just take a few more short minutes and wait for a couple more people to hop on, so we will begin very shortly. Okay, everyone, I think we will go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Emma, and I'll be the moderator for today. I am the Assistant Director of the Illinois Higher Education Center, and I'm very excited to be hosting today's event. Before I hand it over to the speaker, I have a few little housekeeping things that we'll go over. For those of you that are new to GoToWebinar, you'll see a control panel on your right-hand side of your screen. It's already set up for you to listen through your computer speakers by default, and you're automatically muted throughout today's webinar. And along those lines, we'd also love to hear from you guys today. GoToWebinar has different options for you guys to participate. If you have a question for the speaker, there is a question little tab that you can type in a question on, and we will either get to it right then, or we will wait till the end to address your question. And we hope to hit on everybody's questions today. Just feel free to send them in. There is also a chat box that you can utilize throughout the whole group. You can chat to just a certain person, or you can chat to the whole group. Dr. Butterfoss may ask for you guys to chime in at some point, so the chat box is what you will use for that. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to today's speaker, Dr. Butterfoss.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today to speak to you about Ignite, getting your community coalition fired up for change. And I welcome this opportunity to be with you. 1 second, something is weird here. Okay. Sorry, pop up on the screen. So before I get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, so it'll give you a sense of where I'm coming from in this work. My background is in education and public health education. I also have a nursing degree and taught in public schools for many years, worked in the public health community as a visiting nurse, and then being a mature student, went back and received my PhD in public health education and health promotion. I'm married. I have 3 kids, 7 grandkids. I was a military spouse, so have lived in a lot of different places. And currently I'm living in Yorktown, Virginia. I consider myself a recovering academic. I taught at a medical school and ran a research department for 16 years here in Virginia, and have had my own group, Coalitions Work, for 10 years now, working with groups like yours throughout the country who really want to focus on building coalitions or working with the coalitions they have to make them even more vibrant. So I think that's about all I need to say. I love hiking, I love walking, and I love working with groups like yours. So I'm going to start with this visual of the campfire. And Charles Dudley Warner said, "To poke a wood fire is more solid enjoyment than almost anything else in the world." And I don't know about you, but now that it's gotten cold, it's a real nice time to get a fire going in the fireplace. If you're outdoors, maybe with a group of friends, going skating, or being just outside having a campfire, having a fire pit, maybe even on your patio. Just a way to bring warmth to any situation. So I just love a fire. It's the one thing I love about winter. And as I was beginning to think through writing this book, the title of this presentation, Ignite, Getting Your Community Coalition Fired Up for Change, I was looking to develop a shorter book. I do have a textbook out called Coalitions and Partnerships in Community Health. It's a very large tome of a book. It's great if your main work is as a community organizer or a community developer, or you're perhaps coordinating a coalition yourself. But people had been asking me for several years, couldn't I come up with a shorter version that had a lot of the same pieces to it, that was really research developed, but was meant for a more general audience, for people out in the community who might be members of a coalition, who were asked to take on leadership roles, working with other community partners. Couldn't I write something else? So that's how this book came about. And today I want to base my talk on that. And what we'll do is, the graphic that you see now, there are 4 stages, and basically standing around campfires, as I do in a place we have up in the mountains, a very remote cabin. We're always having to have a fire to burn the wood that falls down out of everywhere, the sort of the non-burnable wood that we would want to have in our wood stove. But we have to get rid of it some way. So we have often a bonfire. And as I was building it one day, I'd been thinking about this book and said, is the things that you have to do to make a campfire work for you, in a way, could be likened to what we have to do to build and sustain a partnership. So that's kind of the metaphor that I'll take you through today. But if you look at this graphic, you see there are basically 4 stages. Things you need to do before you build a partnership, things you need to do to build it well, things you need to do to make it work and to sustain it. So if you look on the right-hand column there, we'll be focusing on those items. And on the left-hand column, I'll put a little bit in about the campfire to just kind of keep your attention going here. So let's talk about before you build it. Now, I understand most of you that are on the call probably are already well into the depths of working coalitions. But to me, if you were starting a new one, or even if you have one, there's some things we need to consider. So I always feel it's never too late to go back and maybe add some things in, or just rethink perhaps how you got to where you are now. And I always believe you just start wherever your group is. So as I go through this, I don't want you to be saying, oh, no, I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or I wish I had done that, because there's always time to go back and really rethink and regroup. And because a coalition is a dynamic organization and should be a dynamic, fast-acting response team, you really have the opportunity to make change whenever you see the need. So before you build it, before you build a campfire, you've basically got to think through, are we going to build one? Are the conditions right to build a campfire? When I go up to the mountains, the first thing I do is I call the ranger station. That's about 1.5 miles up the mountain. And I say, what is the fire danger today? And if I saw a sign like this, it's very high, I'm not going to go ahead and have a campfire that day. Secondly, you want to make sure you choose a site that you've cleared, that really is free from clutter, free from leaves, that doesn't have a lot of overhanging branches that could be caught a fire, that it's sheltered somewhat from winds. I know I don't want to be 0.0 in the next forest fire in the national park. So I'm going to be very careful about where I have my fire. If I was out backpacking or camping, again, you clear a site or use a site that's provided for you. And then thirdly, you want to consider, what is the purpose of the fire? Is this just for camaraderie? Is it just utilitarian? I've got to burn all this scrap wood and vines and stuff that has fallen down out of trees. Am I going to cook? Is it for camaraderie, that I'm going to sit around and with a group of people and tell stories, bring out a musical instrument, sing a bit, and just sort of bask in the warmth of this fire? Well, very similarly, before you build a coalition, you've got to consider some of those same things. Should we really build one? I always tell people, if there's an easier way to get something done in a community, and maybe by bringing 2 or 3 partners together, then by all means, you might want to try that first. But because a lot of the issues we work on in community health are very serious issues that have developed over a period of time, then you're probably going to want to bring a diverse set of partners together. But this collaboration might be more informal, might be formal, might be a very large group. If you're in a rural area, it might be much smaller. And then to consider, are we just here to share ideas, to network, or do we really expect some action to come out of our work at the community level? So the other things I would say is, as you get started, before you build the coalition, start thinking about some key questions that you might ask. First of all, as I said before, is it the best way to solve the issues? Who are the priority populations that you're trying to reach with this work? Is there any role that geography plays? I know where I live around lots and lots of water. So transportation is an issue, getting to and from when you've got a lot of tunnels under rivers. You've got bridges that open and close several times a day. We've got a lot of port traffic, so I've got to think about that. When I work in a mountainous area, certainly weather is a factor, and geography in terms of road conditions. So just thinking through where you live, and if you're obviously in an urban area, then you've got issues around parking, around bringing people together, around all the things that happen when you're in a large city. Next, what is the community's history? So is this a community that has worked well together in the past? Maybe a group that would like to work better together, but there's been a little bit of shaky history in terms of politics, in terms of economics, and so forth. Who may want to partner on this issue with you? I would certainly ask that question. And then lastly, does the culture of collaboration exist in this community? Is this likely to be a successful strategy that you might want to use? Oops, sorry. Sorry. So as I'm thinking about building this coalition, one of the first things that I do, especially if I'm asked to come into a community and work with a coalition that either just wants to brush up and look at some things they might do to improve, it might be a community where a coalition is really struggling, or a community where they have very little history of working together in this way. So one of the first things I like to do is do what I call a SWOT analysis. Some of you may call it an environmental scan. But at any rate, you're looking, how ready is this community to collaborate together? So the SWOT analysis, I think, is visual. It's easy for people to grasp. And generally, it can really be fun to do with your community members, as long as you figure out, we're going to do this fairly quickly. We're not going to agonize about it. We're going to make it very, very collaborative and participative. And we're going to learn some things about our community. So in case you've never heard of a SWOT analysis, we're going to look at the strengths. So each letter stands for something: the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. Now, the strengths and weaknesses that we're going to focus on are inherent in the coalition or in this group setting that you find yourself. So what are the things that are going to be helpful to help us achieve our goals, and which things may be harmful? The opportunities and threats are those things in the larger environment. So it's not within the coalition itself, but it might be in the community, in the county, in the city as a whole, in the state, in the nation, and globally. So what's happening that is either going to be an opportunity that we can take advantage of, or a threat that even if we can't do something immediately about, we should be aware of it so that we're able to move forward effectively with our work. So once you've done the SWOT, by the way, what I would do, and again, I would allow about 40 minutes to an hour to do this with your group. I would not do it any longer than that. And basically just go through each of those steps and say, okay, what do you think are the strengths that we have within our coalition? And of course, things like leadership might come up, things like we have some funding, we have good support from our parent agency, and so forth. We have strong volunteers. The weaknesses might be we really haven't paid attention to our structure very carefully. We've got some apathy in the group. Our funding is shaky. So a lot of things that are a strength, the opposite of it obviously might be a weakness. And then you're going to go through the weaknesses, the strengths. When you get to the opportunities, take that bigger picture look. what's happening in your community in terms of jobs, in terms of healthcare, in terms of social services available. So this is sort of the big picture in terms of the issue you're focusing on. So if you're focusing on substance abuse, how does it play out in your community? What do you see as the opportunities that there are for you to be able to do something about opioid addiction, for example? In the threats, we're really looking at what's going to maybe hinder us in our work. The community isn't aware of the problem. This issue isn't high on their list, but we're always looking in terms of assets as well as challenges. So I want to put that out there. And then what I would do at the end, you record it as people, talk about it, and you might have it done in more of a nominal group process where everybody has some sticky notes and puts it up there so you're getting really solid participation from everyone. And then when you're more or less petered out, and I wouldn't get down to the very last person who hasn't said anything, but when you're just about done with it, then you would say, okay, well, I'm going to take this back now and I'm going to send it back out by email. I'm going to record it and put it on paper and let you see it in an email. And then if you've got anything else to add, you've thought of something else, or obviously people who weren't here might want to contribute. Then bring it back one more time. Here it is. Everybody agree this is the state of where we are now. So let's keep this in mind as we move forward. And then it becomes a historical record of where your coalition is at any given time. So in the next year, you could come back a year from then and say, okay, let's do a quick look at this. Has anything changed? Can we take away any of these weaknesses because we've really worked on developing our leadership, for example? Or are there new threats or new challenges that we have as a coalition? So it becomes something that you add to. You don't start over. And I will tell you again, people really, truly enjoy doing this. It can be very collaborative and community building. So now we're going to talk about building the coalition and building the campfire. So when you're thinking about a campfire, or even what you're putting in your fireplace at home, if you don't have one that you just switch on, I do have one of those, you want to make sure you've got the right supply of burnable material. So you're looking for tinder, those dry shredded grass, pine needles. Even one of the best is dryer lint. So when I used to do a lot of backpacking, that was a great thing because you could just stuff it in a little baggie and put a lot in there, and it's going to be very dry, very flammable, very lightweight. Then you're going to look for kindling. That's all those little twigs and sticks and pine cones and stuff. You're going to bring those in, but they're small enough that you can break them. And then your fuel wood can be anything larger than that. And of course, if you're building a very large fire, you're going to have pieces of wood that are large in diameter. You also want to make sure you have a variety of woods, some that are quick burning, some that are long lasting. So pine, cedars, those are fairly quick burning, a lot of pitch in there, a lot of resin. And then the ones like locust wood, for example, or oak, a very much more solid wood, they're going to burn a lot longer. You've got to make sure you build a good base or have a solid infrastructure so the fire doesn't fall apart, so the logs don't go rolling down the hill. And you've got to decide who's going to keep the fire going, who's the fire tender. That's a job I love. I guess I just can never stop messing with the fire. So in my family, I'm the one. When you think about the structure itself of a campfire, lots of ways you can build them. I think by popular opinion, most people like a teepee structure because you build the tent, it gives you a little bit of shelter for your tinder and kindling, and when it collapses on itself. But I will say the larger fire, and we just had a big lighted boat parade in our town, and they put bonfires on the beach for people to keep warm. We're going to build a log cabin or a council fire because that structure is much more solid and it's going to last overnight throughout the evening. So when we think about building a coalition, some of the similar things should go through our mind. We want to gather the right materials. In this case, it's the right organization and individuals that have the skills we need, that represent the priority populations in your community, who have the desire to come together and work in collaboration. And we want to make sure they're trained. So we're looking for this broad group of partners who are also going to stay in it over the long haul. And maybe some people will come in for short periods of time, like that quick burning log, and then others certainly we want to last for as long as it's going to take to work on the issue. We got to start thinking about where are we as a community now? What are our strengths and assets? And I know we talk about community needs assessments, and I just reviewed an article today where they kept talking about the problems in the community and never once mentioned the assets that are in the community. So we want to consider both. Lots of ways to do that. You can look, especially if you're looking at incidents of where issues pop up, like, you know, in certain schools, in certain zip codes, in certain parts of your county, certainly your county maps and the data that's available from the county road maps and health rankings, from your local health and planning divisions in your community, from your hospitals. A lot of data is available out there that you can use to really get to know what does this data tell us about our community and where we should focus our work and on what we should focus our work. What if there's already a network or a coalition out there? For those of you who are starting new, or those of you who are maybe struggling because you're in a rural area and it's, you know, it's harder to find the partners, you may become a working group of an existing coalition or partnership. That's really possible. But really trying not to see others who are working on the same issue as competitors, but as potential collaborators is really key. You want to get out there. We talked about looking at the data, but you've also just got to get out there and see where this issue that you're focusing on is playing out. So what is the community like? Where do people hang out? Where do youth spend their free time? What issues are parents struggling with? Parents of young children, people who are caregivers for their parents, the elderly, really trying to figure out, what can you tell me about this community that will help us in our work? That one-on-one conversation is really important. We want to make sure we pay attention to diversity and we respect it. So as we build this coalition, we're focusing on all those individuals and organizations that are serving the populations that we're trying to reach. So we're looking across ages, across racial and ethnic groups, across economic levels. So we're really thinking as broadly as we can about diversity and always keeping that in our mind. And really, as we begin to hone in on what we're going to actually do once we've got this coalition solidly built, we want to make sure we're reaching out to any specific groups that are the priority of our work. And I use that term very deliberately. I don't like the term target populations because I think nobody wants to be a target of anything. So really thinking through how can we make sure that these people, these groups, these parts of our community are our priority. It just changes the whole conversation. We want to make sure now we start to hone in. Who are the people and organizations that we're going to engage? Who are the individuals and who are the organizations? And I will say, when you're talking about a coalition or partnership, you're primarily talking about recruiting organizations for the work. That's the power that's there, the power in numbers, the power of their contacts, their influence, their past work and respect in the community. Not to say that you wouldn't have some advocates, some individuals that you might want to bring in just because they really have their ear close to the ground of what's happening in the community. So one way I'd like to think about this is kind of a wheel here, and thinking about the community in terms of sectors of the community. And you can define these sectors any way you'd like. Some easy ways might be to think of the organizations that serve the community. So the schools, the medical organizations, medical and health organizations, the religious and faith community, the business community, governmental, the governmental sector, and maybe some specific advocacy groups like senior citizens, like youth, like parents. So one of the first jobs that you have to do as you're recruiting, and even after you have recruited, a very nice thing is to look at the groups you've recruited and see if they are actually fitting in these sectors, if there are any that are blank or any that are really lacking in partners. So, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I do have a website called Coalitions Work, and that's a sentence. It's coalitionswork.com. And I do have many tools on there, some of which I'll be referring to today. But one of them that I particularly like as we're getting into this part of the presentation is something called a gap analysis in the community. So starting to look at what are these organizations, and it gives you step by step how you can really analyze, are you functionally reaching all those sectors that you should be reaching? In addition to that, there may be some individual skills, so kind of looking at it from a skill vantage point rather than the sectors that you may need to make sure this coalition is effective. So making sure you have people who are skilled in organizations who are skilled in advocacy and fundraising, in the finance world, in marketing, in planning, people that are well-known and solid leaders and ralliers and catalysts in your community. So this is where it may be that you're going to be looking more at individuals than you are organizations. But just to be aware, you're sort of doing both things at once. But that would give you a good picture. Are you meeting the needs of this community by having the right partners at the table? So I just as a little chat here now, if we could, I'd like to ask you, are there any partners that maybe you think are unusual or that you were particularly happy to be able to recruit to your partnership? And if you could just chat some of those, that would be fun to see what you have. So I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything on my chat box.
Oh,
Eric or Emma, are you?
yeah, we actually have one that was submitted through the questions, and that was Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce is great because one of the key groups that is missing in most communities that I work with are representatives from the business community. So the businesses are those groups that are going to be able to perhaps provide some funding, some business acumen, some incentive items when you're doing a big community activity. And the Chamber of Commerce is a great way to start because they have not only the large businesses that may be obvious, the more Fortune 500 kind of partners out there, the Googles and the Ford Motor Company, but they've got all the small businesses, medium and small businesses in your community. So that's a great one. Wonderful. Thanks.
Perfect, Fran. We have another one.
Okay.
It is bar owners and landlords.
All right. So these are organizations then that are going to help you get to your priority audience, right? So people who are seeing folks on a weekly or monthly basis, who have a free and easy conversation with them, who have their, as I said before, the ear to the ground in the community, so barbershops, beauty shop owners, and landlords, certainly, especially if you're focusing on issues related to housing, crime, they may help enlighten you and give you access to those members who are living in affordable housing or living in housing communities. So yeah, another great one. These are good. Anyone else?
And that's all I've seen thus far.
Okay. All right. Well, feel free to add if you think of something a little bit later on. But we'll go ahead now and go back. So I just like I like people to be thinking, what are other ways that I can reach my community? And that's to really think of those people that maybe aren't normally called upon to participate. So how do you get people there then? You've thought of all these folks and maybe you even have some of them already at the table. One thing I would say about recruitment and engagement after that is that it's a job that's never done. So for those of you who are listening in, when you've got a nice, cozy, comfortable group of maybe 15 partners, 20 partners, and you're feeling like, good, we're all set, we can just go now. at that point, you're already sort of closing the door to other possibilities. So I always tell coalitions that I work with that you are never done recruiting. And even when you think you're done, you always want to have your members reaching out to bring other partners in. I don't think there's any set number that coalition should have. I know sometimes your funding agency might say, well, you need one representative from each of these sectors. I've never found it a detriment to have a lot of members in a coalition. It's just that the more you have, the more deliberate you need to be about how you organize the work. So lots of ways to recruit. I think introductory letters are a little rare now, but certainly by email or by some other third-party way of getting through to folks. But I want to caution you that those should always be followed up with a face-to-face meeting. Because if you really want to get people engaged, you need to have that talk that says, how do you think you could contribute? Here's why we're inviting you. This is what we think you have to offer. Does that sound right? Does that sound like something that could be helpful to your own organization or to yourself? So you're building this relationship right from the start. And I have folks who tell me, oh, I've tried to build a diverse partnership. I've sent out an email, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and then I just give up. So you really want to make sure you don't give up, that if people aren't responding to you, you have to hit the road and get out there and meet them one-on-one in their own environment. You can certainly connect with people through the organizations that are part of the coalition. So they may have partners that they work with that might also be excited and see it as an opportunity to work with your coalition. Anytime you do anything out in the community, an assessment, a conference, a training, a walk, any of those times are great opportunities to recruit people because they see you in action and they might get excited about it and might say, boy, what could I do? How could I get involved? That's a great time also to recruit. So bottom line, you're always recruiting. I also like to see that there's some commitment on the part of the members who are coming in. Now, I know some of you have funding that actually requires you to get a memorandum of understanding, a memorandum of agreement, MOU, MOA. But if they don't, then one thing you can do is do a very simple, what I call a member commitment card, where you're asking people to sign, to put in writing, to make it real that they are going to participate with you in this group. And they have their name, they have their signature, a date, and I would encourage you to try to get this from the actual leader, officer of that organization. So the president, the CEO, the director, because when they agree to send someone as a representative or come themselves, but especially if they agree to send someone, you want to be able to go back and know that they know what you're about, because sometimes it doesn't always get communicated in a two-way fashion between the member and their organization and the coalition. So making sure that the commitment comes from on top and that you're then able to go back and say, hey, this person just isn't working out. They really aren't interested. They just don't seem to be the right fit. Could you send someone else? Or as you ask them, what resources could you contribute for us? Maybe the resources are volunteers from their organization. Maybe it's some kind of in-kind give, like we're going to help you with some office space. We're going to be able to provide some printing services, some marketing services. We're going to be able to provide you with some startup funds or a grant. You want to have all those things out on the table as soon as you can. So there's an understanding each of these partners has some skin in the game, right?
Excuse me, Dr. Butterfoss. I just wanted to give you your requested reminder that we're 30 minutes through.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep.
The other thing that can happen is you can decide that you want a more formal letter. So again, if you go on my website, and that is under tools and resources, you will see some a formal letter of commitment. So a little bit more in depth that outlines what are the benefits and what do you expect from the partner. So once you've recruited folks now and you've got them to say, yes, I'm committed, I'm going to sign this commitment card, what makes them join and stay? What makes them stay engaged? So these are some of the things listed here. First of all, they might believe in the mission. Hopefully they believe in the mission and they're excited about doing something about this issue. They're there to build relationships. They're there to accomplish something, hopefully the mission, but very specific goals. They want to have influence and they maybe just want to be up to date. They want to be in the know. In fact, they're looking like these babies, very happy, contented. They are in it. They're in it to win it. Why do they go? Well, in my point of view, a lot of times they're like this unhappy baby. They just don't feel included. They don't know why they're there in the first place. They don't feel included or respected. Sorry. They aren't sure exactly what it is they're supposed to do. They come every month, but they're not really sure what it is they're supposed to do. Their role has not been clarified. And maybe they just don't see anything happening. They don't see any results from all this effort that they're putting in. So we want to make sure we have the happy babies, not this sad one there. And part of it, going back to the role here, we need to make sure they understand what their responsibilities are as a member. So it's not just a matter of showing up. You're really expecting that they are at some point going to take a leadership role, be it leading a task group, leading a work group, leading a specific activity that's going on. You want to make sure that everybody sees it as their job to recruit, that they're going to share what the coalition is doing with their organization or their neighborhood, and they're going to share what's going on in their neighborhood with you at the coalition. Certainly, they're going to support the work that's done in as many ways as possible, and you would certainly hope that they're going to be advocates for the cause. That's high on the list. And I think about this as being a community ambassador. One of the tools, by the way, that you might want to look at is a tool on the website that's called Am I a High Functioning Coalition Member? A great little checklist that you could use as a conversation starter. And again, all of this is in the Ignite book, but if you go on the website, they're all there, they're free. It's a downloadable PDF. If you want a Word document, just let me know and I can send that to you. But you want to make sure that you're really getting these folks engaged in the work. And then you've got to make sure you've got the structures in place that it's going to make this coalition or partnership effective. So you've got all these pieces, the mission, the roles, the rules, the work groups, and you don't do it all at once. You know, you work on this over time. So it's like putting the roof on that building or building the structure for the campfire. You want to be deliberate about it. And one of the things you want to have as kind of the bare minimum in my viewpoint is a clear description of your mission, vision, and goals. Sorry. So I think most people do have a mission statement, but I also like there to be a vision. And the vision statement says, in the best possible world, this is where we want to be in the future. It can be really audacious. It can be idealized. This is your foundational work. This probably isn't something that you're going to advertise far and wide or put out there on any advertising that you do or any marketing that you do, but it's the grounding that your coalition needs. So an example vision might be, our county is the healthiest place to live, work, play, learn, and pray. Our county is substance free. So again, if you could do anything about this issue, that's what the vision is. And so it's always there in front of you. You're always striving toward that vision. The mission, on the other hand, says, this is what we have to do to reach that vision. This is what you're going to share. This is your very short elevator speech that if anyone asks you about the coalition or you're trying to explain it, you know it in a very, very succinct statement. So an example mission might be, we're going to promote prevention policy systems and environments that support healthy lifestyles. Another example, we are going to provide education, training, and advocacy that reduces substance use and abuse in our community. It's very clear what it is you're focusing on. The goals, on the other hand, are those very specific ideals that you're going to reach to accomplish your mission. So some examples under here. Might be to prevent suicide, self-harm, and interpersonal violence, to prevent prescription drug abuse and underage drinking, to promote teen driver and child passenger safety, and so on. So the goals are dreams with deadlines, right? So you're going to have them outlined very clearly. And under those goals, you're going to have a set of, some people do have objectives, but you're at least going to have a set of strategies that you are going to use to accomplish your goals. And we'll focus on that in the next section. I want to go back to organizational structure here. So this is an example of what a coalition might look like, or a partnership might look like. If you are your own 501c3, this top block that says grantee or convener agency would not be there. You would be your own non-for-profit. If you claim your non-for-profit status through another organization like a Department of Social Services, a Department of Health, another nonprofit organization, then you would have that box there. I like to see that there's a steering committee, and I very specifically don't call it an executive committee. I want it to be very flat organizationally, not be a hierarchy kind of model. But that steering committee would be made up of a chair and a vice chair of the entire coalition. They're the face of the coalition, the key leaders that are seen and visible. And then you might have your work groups. And again, I don't use the term committee very deliberately, because I want the term to describe what we expect. We expect these groups to do some work. You might call them an action team, whatever you choose, but something that denotes that something is going to happen as these groups come together. So on that steering committee, you would have the chairs of each of those working groups. I would suggest anywhere from 2 to 4 groups, and not more than that, because remember, there's a lot of organization that has to happen to keep all the balls in the air. And then lastly, you'll see off the steering committee, I also have something called task groups. These would be more short-lived, not standing committees, so to speak, but they come together for a very specific purpose. It's limited, it's time dependent, and they disband. So you might have a group that comes together to come up with a marketing plan, a small group that comes together to develop your website, a group that comes together to come up with a slate of nominees for your elections, but very specific, short term. And so it's a way to engage people that might not want to commit for a year to be meeting every month on a working group, but could come together for 2 or 3 meetings and do some very specific work that the coalition needs done. Other structures might be that you have some bylaws. I wouldn't do that as the first thing out of the gate, but along the road, you certainly should have some bylaws that at least describe, what the leadership roles are, what your mission and vision are, what things you have to vote on as a partnership. For example, your leadership, your budget, your advocacy agenda. You want to make sure you've got regular meetings that people can count on, the second Tuesday of every month, the third Wednesday of every quarter, however you decide to meet, that you've got your historical documents in order. So you've got an agenda for every meeting, even if it's a phone meeting. You've got minutes for every meeting. You keep a roster of members that's available to other members. And you know how you're going to communicate best together. So what's the best way to reach you? By email? Do we do action alerts? How do we use the public media? Then the most important part in my mind is you want to have leadership that's going to get things done for your coalition. So I show these ladies, they are from Jenkins County in Georgia, and a group that I worked with for a couple of years because they really were in a community that was quite under-resourced. The only time I've ever done a SWOT analysis where we really could hardly think of a single thing to put under strengths and under opportunities. But these 4 women and the woman on the right, who was a county councilwoman, were first wives or first ladies of the pastors of 4 large churches in that county. And they came together around diabetes management and prevention because they had been listed as the lowest in the state. In other words, they had the highest rates of diabetes in the state. And they came together, and this picture was when they came out with what their logo was, what they were going to do, and were ready to really promote their partnership. So as coalition leaders, we're looking for people who are, as I said, the face of the coalition. They really create and share and live out that vision and mission. They're there to build the community, build engagement of members. They're going to put those strategies in place that are likely to work, and they're mentors for the future leaders. So I said in that picture that this was transformational leadership. And this is a very specific kind of leadership that says we are going to do something pretty awesome in this community. We're not here just to, make a deal to set out a set of objectives and achieve them. We really want to develop some capacity in the community to continue doing this transformational work. So I do have a tool called Am I a Transformational Leader? And you'll look at the 4 things that transformational leaders do, the 4 characteristics of transformational leadership, that they're inspirational, that they are wonderful mentors, that they are role models, and that they really are able to rally people because they consider them as individuals first. And then very specific tasks that transformational leaders should do. And so, look at this list and see where you fall. Are you transformational? Where are the areas that are difficult for you? And again, I would take that tool and think about using it with your coalition to ask them where are the areas that they need more training, where are the areas where, as a group of leaders, you could improve and be more effective. Some of the incentives you might provide are this list, that you're providing skills, you're providing training, you're providing networking opportunities, you're increasing their own organization's visibility and respect by being connected with you. And maybe some specific things like you're going to, write letters of volunteer service that can go in their professional file, that they might need a letter of reference for a new job or a recommendation for an advancement within their current job. So I think incentives are important to keep people engaged as leaders. And I guess the next chat I want to ask you is, what incentives have you used or have you experienced in your coalitions that have made it more likely for you to go on and continue to be a leader? So if you can chat any of those ideas, any incentives, even if you agree with some of the ones I mentioned, or if you have something very specific you've done that you think really has built this idea of leadership by all in the coalition. So I'll give you a minute or so.
Feel free to send anything through the chat, and if there's any issues with finding the chat option, you can send it through as a question as well, and we can get it that way too.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, do we have any?
I'm not sure. 1 second. Nope, not yet. So I think we're good.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to take it then that you agree with the ones I gave, and if you think of others after, feel free to add. So now we're at Make It Work. How do we make our coalition work? Well, to make the campfire work, we got to start the fire. We've got to have the match. We've got to have my husband's favorite, the lighter fluid, and we've got to make sure we have a ready source of fuel supply. I can tell you, I do not have a mountain of fuel wood like that, but if I did, there would be no problem in making sure that we were ready to ignite our work. So part of making your coalition work is making sure that people are engaged at all levels of the work, right from the beginning, from assessment to creating an action plan to helping to initiate the strategies. You want them involved. They leave every meeting with a task. There's shared responsibility is what you're looking for. I think it's helpful to have a logic model, and I know people kind of cringe sometimes when you see this out here, but I think if you can construct a logic model of how you're going to focus on this work, and you can do it very simply in columns, very simple column. Don't worry about boxes and arrows and all this. You really just want to know how is what you're doing leading to change. And again, I have a template of one of those on the website, but what are you putting into it? That's your time, your staff, your volunteers, your funds. What are the actions that you're going to do? Primarily, are you focusing on training? Are you focusing on prevention work, sting operations in the community? What is some tangible results that shows that you're actually having an effect? So are you actually doing some things? And then what are the short, intermediate, and long-term outcomes that you're going to see? The influencing factors you already have because you did your SWOT analysis. So those positive things and negative things that could affect your work are in there. Those are your influencing factors. So after that, then you're going to figure out, okay, we've got these goals. Let's figure out which ones we're going to prioritize for this coming year and what strategies would fit under those goals. So what strategy is going to have the greatest impact and that we can do the easiest with the least amount of effort and time? You know, is how big is the return on investment or return on commitment of time and resources? And what are the steps that we need to put in place? So really you're starting to construct your action plan. I like to think of it this way when I'm prioritizing. You know, you want to start first in that upper right-hand quadrant. Things that have a high impact and are easy to do is what you want to start on first, or on those things that are low-hanging fruit. So the easy to do, they might not have a very high impact, but it gets you started, gets the ball rolling. And then, of course, there's some things you must do, and your grantor especially will tell you what those are that have a high impact that may be a little harder to do, but you never want to end up in that lower left quadrant for things that are hard to do and aren't going to have much return for you. So just a way to visualize that. And then you want to put your plan together. So you've got your strategies, your action steps, the outcomes that you expect to happen, who's going to help you do it, and what resources do you need, what barriers may be in the way. I think an action plan should be not overly ambitious, something that you can accomplish in a year's time, and then you revisit it. How are we making progress? Do we have to change our course of action? But you want to have a plan in place that your members help you construct, not one that you and your staff or you and a group of professionals sit in a room and do and present it to the community. They have a role in developing this plan. Then we want to focus on action. We want to make sure that coalition is visible, that its work is out there, is very tangibly working on whatever the issue is in the community. We want to focus on advocacy. This is some work we did back in the late 90s around tobacco use, especially in bars and restaurants, because we're in Virginia, we're a tobacco state. So it was very hard to get restaurants and bars to agree to go smoke-free or tobacco-free. And the gentleman in the striped shirt was the head of the local restaurant bar association, and he made his restaurants smoke-free. We brought the governor in, and over time, the entire state, and I shouldn't say the entire state, but most of the state, there was still a couple of pockets, voluntarily developed smoke-free dining. So that was terrific. So you want to focus on advocacy. You want to make sure that the coalitions, that the organizations and individuals that you've recruited are actively participating, actively sharing the resources and talents that they have. And then you want to focus on those things that are going to change policies, change the systems in your community, and change the environmental context in the community. So you're not looking for necessarily feel-good activities. You're looking for things that are really going to have an effect. So just to in case you've not heard the term policy systems and environmental change, we're looking for things that are more long-term at the community level, that are sustainable. So when we talk about advocacy, when we talk about education, these are things that are sustainable in the community. When we talk about building, for example, in communities that are working on preventing obesity and promoting physical activity, some of those physical changes might be a little expensive, like creating walking paths or a shared use agenda, but that can be done. So we're really looking, what are those things that are going to have a big effect? So we want to initiate those advocacy actions. These are some folks that, in the Midwest that were able to get some real strong change around school use and prevention in schools. So very excited when they were able to get that passed, that legislation passed. And then we're on the last stage now, so sustaining the coalition. How do we sustain it? Well, if we're sustaining the campfire, you know when that happens, you got that base of coals, it's burning red hot, you're able to crack out the marshmallows and the s'mores, and you're able to keep it going for as long as you need to keep it going. And then you also know sometimes there's a time to put it out, to douse the fire, and Smokey tells you how to do that. So how do you sustain your coalition? Well, I think what we normally think of is those financial and in-kind supporters that keep us going. So the money, the grant money, the donations, the volunteer support. But there are other ways we really need to focus on sustaining the coalition. So thinking about funding, there's not just one or two things that you can do. And in fact, I'm sorry, this is an error. Under budget, the next line fits there. So having dues, and I do know coalitions around the country who do have a membership dues that they charge, very minimal, a sliding scale fee, but it's a way of knowing that we'll have operating expenses during the downtimes, operating funds, excuse me. Having budget allocations or being a line item on another organization's budget is very helpful, because now you can count on that funding. You can have fundraising events, and you can have individual donors or business donors. You can have contributions, both financial and in kind. And we count an awful lot on in-kind contributions when we're doing collaborative work. Local grants and contracts. And the last one is fees for service. So some of the things that you've maybe always provided for free, you might think about charging for them, to be able to provide maybe a renowned speaker, to be able to provide some food or refreshment. And what I've found is, when coalition that I've been working with for 25 years, about 10 years ago, we decided we could no longer, we were having so many people come to our trainings and our summits that we held every year, that we decided we had to charge. And once we started doing that, what happened was we actually had more people come and a lower response, lower no-show rate. So it was very, very helpful for us. So I guess I'm curious, of those funding methods, how many have you used, or do you have something different that you've used to keep your coalition going? So if you chat that, please, appreciate it. I guess I'd especially like to know if you have more than one, because oftentimes coalitions and partnerships rely on one source of funding, and I'm hoping that that's not the case with all of you.
Dr. Butterfoss, as we wait for a few seconds, just wanted to
Yes.
give you a reminder.
Yep. Okay. And we're on the downside here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Emma, any?
Nope.
Well, it's a quiet group today. All right. Well, I'm just going to take it that maybe those things are possibilities you can look at. All right. So again, sustainability is not just about the funding, even though that's just what I talked about in the previous couple of slides. It's really, how do you sustain that energy? How do you sustain that public interest in the work that you're trying to do? That's really a key element, and it's ongoing. You've constantly got to be thinking of new ways to get people excited and interested. Also, part of sustainability is evaluation. So we talked before about the logic model, but if you have done that, if you have created a logic model, then you know what your short, intermediate, and long-term outcomes are. So how can you evaluate whether or not you're actually reaching those? So thinking through the methods that you can use to reach folks, to get the voice of the whole community. That's what's important. I like to think of it like a wedding cake. So we're going to evaluate some things about at level one about the infrastructure or the process or the function of the coalition. So a lot of what we've been talking about in the first three parts of this presentation. Secondly, you're going to evaluate the strategies that you put in place. I think that's kind of obvious. You're definitely going to do that. And then thirdly are those long-term changes. So the things that you can learn from your hospital discharge data, from your emergency data, from your police records, from your school records. So are you having more of this long-term impact? And then using a variety of methods to do that. So not just surveys, but doing focus groups, doing community forums, doing observation studies, lots of ways to do this, and we could have a whole presentation on evaluation. But if you're not evaluating, you're not very likely to be sustainable and to be refundable, because funders want to know, what did you do? What's the bottom line? How effective were you as a coalition in focusing and making change about this particular community issue? Another part of sustainability is getting the word out about you. So marketing your coalition, marketing the issue, spreading the word out there by using all of the social media, all of the regular communication channels, radio, TV, cable TV, flyers, posters, all those things that I know a lot of you are already doing. But it's worth it to have a couple of people in the coalition, or even a person who does this professionally, to help you market and get the word out about what's happening and why people should care about this issue. I think it's very helpful to have an organizational message to do that. If you've got your vision and mission, that's part of it. Another part of it is to say, what have we done and what results have we seen? And then the last thing is a request for action. What is it you want people to do? You want them to contribute to you? Do you want them to participate in the activities? But it's an overall one-page description of your coalition. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is what we do. This is what results we've received. And this is how we want to engage you in this very important work. Coalitions have to be adaptable. So as you move along in the chain of work, you know that sometimes you have to change yourself, your own structure, your own processes in the coalition to be more effective. We've talked a lot about that. Sometimes you need to take a strategy that's worked and spin it off to another partner, maybe who's more has the funds to do it, who maybe is better positioned to do it. But essentially, the coalition and partnership can be a training, a proving ground, a living laboratory where you try some strategies, and if they work and could be implemented long term, then maybe there's an organization who could take that on. And then know when it's time to expand your work, maybe move into another town within your county, maybe to work in another zip code of your city, maybe work regionally. And sometimes it's time to end the collaboration. So coalitions were never meant to be permanent. And sometimes it's time to say, we did what we said we would do. We're at a point where we're ready to move on, and give a good eulogy, have a celebration, focus on what you've done, and maybe point out what work still needs to be done. So that's the 4 stages before you build it, make it work, and sustain it. And my hope is, and my expectation is, that if you focus in any one of these areas over the next year and really put some effort into strengthening the coalition and make it more sustainable, you will really see incredible results. But it is intentional. It's not something that's just going to happen. It's really going to take commitment and effort on the part of you as the organizer and your members to make this coalition stand out from the rest. And Smokey says only you can change your community, and I do believe that. I've seen it over many, many years, and that's why I keep doing this work myself. So I'll ask for any questions that anyone has, or any discussion, Emma, that maybe you want to initiate. And also, I just wanted to provide my contact information. If you have just a simple question or something that's just getting you stuck, you can always just email me. I get questions all the time, and I'm very happy to answer them, and I will answer them. And again, you can go to my website and and find any of the resources that I mentioned there. Okay, let's go back to the questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Butterfoss, for all of your information and sharing your resources with us. Yeah, we have a few minutes. We can stay on. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send them in. And as well as getting a hold of her later, if you need something, you can contact me and I can get a hold of her as well, if that works better for you.
Okay.
But
And Emma, I'm very happy if anyone wants a copy of the presentation. They certainly can you can share that with them.
okay,
I'm happy for folks to use it. Just give me credit if give Coalition's work credit if there's specific slides that have proprietary information. I appreciate that.
awesome. Thank you so much. Looks like we have someone requesting a copy, so that'll be awesome.
Okay.
And if you have any questions, once again, feel free to put them in the chat box or the questions while we're looking at it, and we can answer those for you. All right, we just have someone asking when a copy can be available. I have that, so I will be able to send that out.
Okay.
Mm. We have someone asking more examples on how to design a logic model.
Okay. Yeah. So on my website, I do have. I guess I really just have the form, but if I had your email, I could actually, or I could just send it actually to you, Emma, just an example of one that would be completed, if that's
Perfect.
helpful. Is that kind
Yeah,
of what? Yeah. Okay.
I think so. And we also have a webinar on December 11th on logic models.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, a little shameless plug there, but you can also feel free to join us with that if there's any lasting questions as well.
Well, that's timely. Good.
Yeah.
I guess I just find, and I've really tried to encourage grantors as people are applying for grants to ask people to include a logic model of how they think their coalition is supposed to operate and what they expect to accomplish. And to me, if you really had to sit down and think about this, then you're just so many steps ahead. And it's really helpful to your partners who may or may not be versed in how to figure out what are the reasonable outcomes, what are the promising practices and strategies and the evidence-based practices that you might use. So I'd be glad to I'll send you one, especially for an entire coalition, which is kind of large, but it'll give you the idea.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. We'll take a few more minutes, but while we wait, I would like to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Butterfoss, for sharing with us all of your knowledge. We really appreciate it. And if everyone who is in attendance could fill out the evaluation that will be sent to you automatically 1 hour after this webinar ends, it helps us plan for future events.
Okay.
All right, and if we're not seeing anything else, I think we can go ahead and log off if everyone's good to go. All right, well, thank you very much again, Dr. Butterfoss. We really appreciate it, and thanks everyone for joining us. Oh,
Thank
wait.
you.
Oh, we have a thank you. Everyone's saying thank you so much for your time. So,
Okay. Great.
all
Great.
right,
Well,
everyone.
it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Right. Bye.
Bye.